Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story.
This fictional story involves forced communication between adults, including the main character who took advantage of the situation by pretending to be someone he is not. If you don't want to read stories like this, please look elsewhere. Life is crazy, Stan thought, sitting at his computer, looking at the pictures and trying to understand how profoundly his life had changed over the last 6 months. Well, not just his life, but that of his wife and her circle of friends. 6 months earlier, although his career had taken off, he spent 60+ hours a week at a company that doesn't seem to care that it is burning out people. He often worked late hours and weekends and did a lot of traveling between the company offices. On the other hand, his wife, Jen, spent most of her days repeating what she did yesterday. She is often discouraged that her efforts don't seem to change anything and often wonders if anyone there would even notice if she went missing. Jen often lamented how it was one of the downsides of working for one of the largest companies on the planet. Recently, she was offered the ability to telework, which she accepted, hoping it would fit better with Stan's travel allowing her to go with him. The change in her position seemed like a perfect time to move closer to where Stan worked. They had been talking about selling their house ever since their youngest child, Becky, left for college. There was just too much space, and Stan didn't have time to keep up on the maintenance. They put the house up for sale, and 3 months later, they were moving into a 3-bedroom apartment on the north side of town. It was a friendly complex with 8 large units in each building, and the best part was Stan didn't have to do any of the maintenance. It took 2 full days to load the moving truck and clean the old place up. It was late on Friday afternoon as Stan and Jen walked out the front door. Taking one last look, they locked the door for the last time. "Are you going to be okay leaving for the last time?" Stan asked as they climbed into the car. "It doesn't seem real," Jen said, looking back at the house as they left the driveway. "We have spent the last 16 years here. I hope the new owners make good memories like we have." The moving company told them they would have everything at the new house on Monday morning, which left them with a couple of options for the weekend. They had argued over where to spend the weekend for the last couple of days. Stan wanted to get a nice hotel and enjoy some downtime. Jen wanted to rough it in the new place. Ultimately, they decided to stay at the new home, stopped by a department store to grab some things, including an air mattress, and headed to the new house. "This is so exciting," Jen told Stan, giggling like a teenager. Stan sighed. He had given in to Jen because selling the house and moving seemed to have made her a little depressed, and he had hoped it would cheer her up. "Sleeping on the floor in an empty house is not exciting, Jen," Stan told her, trying his best parental face. "Oh, lighten up, Stan. You have tried for years to get me to go camping. Think of this like camping, but without the bugs or animals and indoor plumbing." Jen said, not losing her enthusiasm, "Only you would look at it that way," he told her, letting a grin slip onto his face. They pulled into the apartment complex and parked close to the building. Jen grabbed some bags and the keys and started up the walkway. Glancing over her shoulder at Stan, "I will let you carry the heavy stuff since I am on vacation," she said with a smirk. Stan watched her as she walked until she entered the building, thinking how lucky he was. Even after 2 children, she still looked stunning. At 5'7", Jen had a slim figure with long legs and a fit body. Shaking his head, he grabbed the heaver bags and the air mattress and followed Jen into the building. He walked down the short hall before turning down an intersecting hallway. As he took the turn, he found Jen standing before their door, talking to an older woman and a young man. The woman looked at least 10 years older than Jen, and was a little more plump than Stan cared for. Her dark hair had a few streaks of silver in it, but looked nice against her mahogany complexion. The young man standing behind her was in his early 20s with short dark hair. "It's so nice that someone is finally living in the Armstead place," the older woman told Jen as Stan walked up. The young man stood a little behind the woman talking to Jen and looked out of place, shifting back and forth on his feet. The woman noticed Stan approaching, and her expression changed slightly, becoming less warm and inviting. Jen noticed the change and looked back to see what might have caused it. Reaching out with her free hand, she pulled her husband close. "Stan, this is Camilla and her son Donald. They live down the hall from us. Camilla, Donald, this is my husband, Stan. Hello to you both," Stan said, sitting down the boxes he was carrying and extending his hand for Camilla to shake. Camilla's expression changed to a smile again. "I'm not shaking your hand." "We're neighbors," she said, brushing Stan's hand off and hugging him. Stan glanced at Jen and lifted his eyebrows, causing her to grin. Camilla released Stan and pushed her son forward. "Donald, where are your manners, son? Say hi to our new neighbors." Like his mother, Donald ignored Stan's hand and wrapped him in a bear hug, crushing the air out of him. Stan patted Donald on the back and was relieved when he finally let him go. "Hello, mister," he said shyly before stepping between the couple to grab Jen, repeating the same greeting he had just given Stan. Jen squealed as he wrapped his arms around her and lifted her off the floor, pulling her close. Jen found herself pressed against him tightly, her arms pinned to her sides and unable to move. As the hug continued, Donald kept one hand in the middle of her back, holding her close, while his other hand slowly slid up her until he wrapped his arms around her bottom. What? Jen thought as she tried to move away from him. His grip on her tightened almost to the point of pain as she struggled. Feeling like she couldn't break free and not wanting to make a scene, Jen relaxed a bit, hoping it would all be over soon. Jen felt his leg as he held her close. "Oh my God," she thought. "Now, Donald, let the nice woman free." Camilla told Donald, "You don't want to scare her off, do you?" she asked her son, playfully swatting him on the back. When it became clear that Donald didn't want to listen to his mother, Jen opened her mouth to tell him off when he suddenly let her go. She pushed back a bit and almost fell on the bags she dropped when Donald picked her up. Donald grabbed her arm to steady her, placing her hand on his pants. Jen's eyes got big as she realized where her hand was. He let her snatch her hand back and smiled at her. Stan noticed that Jen looked slightly panicked as she stepped further away from Donald. He glanced at Camilla, raising an eyebrow. "You smell nice," he said before turning to his mother. "Can I go play, Mommy? Please, Mommy." "Sure, go find something on TV to watch while I talk to the nice people," Camilla told him before she stepped close to Jen and put her hand on Jen's arm. "Please forgive him, dear. He was hit by a car riding his bike when he was 10. His body recovered, but his mind hasn't been the same since then. He developed slower than the other kids and didn't understand things like he should for his age. Poor dear," Jen said, her anger evaporating as she watched Donald's receding down the hall. Jen looked at Camilla. "It's okay. He didn't hurt me." She knelt to pick up the bags she had dropped when Donald grabbed her. "I see you have things to carry in, and I don't want to keep you. It was nice to meet you both," Camilla said, smiling again before turning and following Donald home. As she walked away, Stan looked at Jen and gave her a weak smile. She grinned back and entered the apartment, leaving him standing in the hall. He glanced back at Camilla before following Jen through the door into the apartment. "She seems friendly, but he seems to have issues," Stan told Jen after he closed the door to the apartment. "I think it's sad what happened to him," Jen said as she began putting away the things they got at the store. "The whole thing must have been hard on his mother." "I guess," Stan said. He took the mattress into the bedroom to set it up. After a few trips from the car to the apartment later, Stan had set up a pair of lawn chairs in the living room and a small TV. Just like camping, Stan joked after he got everything hooked up. They worked around the apartment doing what they could before ordering Chinese takeout for dinner. After dinner, they went onto the balcony to enjoy the warm spring night. "You've been kind of quiet tonight," Stan said after a while when the silence became awkward. "Just thinking about the new neighbors," Jen vaguely replied as she turned towards Stan and smiled at him. Ever since that happened, she'd been thinking about how Donald had insulted her in the hallway, and how that didn't make him do it in front of her husband and his mother. how helpless she felt, and a little afraid of how excited she was by this meeting. The lack of control she felt, and the sheer boldness as he forced her hand to him. "I'm sure they are nice people. Maybe after we get settled, we can invite them over for dinner," Stan said, wrapping his arms around his wife. "That sounds nice," Jen said, putting her head on his shoulder for a few minutes before pushing him away. "Let's go to bed," she said, winking at him. They walked back into the house and went to the bedroom. Selfish, she thought as she slipped into bed quietly so as not to wake him. Of all the nights to fall asleep, this had to be the night she was excited. Jen tried to sleep, but she was still tense from the collision in the hallway. Her mind replayed how easily Donald had immobilized her before forcing her to grab him. She began to pleasure herself as she imagined being forced to stand there while Donald abused her. As Jen finished, she buried her face into the pillow to muffle the scream that escaped her as she reached the pleasure. She lay there trembling for a few minutes, trying to catch her breath before climbing out of bed and going into the bathroom to clean herself up. With the bathroom door shut, she turned on the light. "I guess I got a little carried away." Jen shuddered as she touched the spot she had squeezed in pleasure. Noticing that her clothes were soaked, she took them off and hid them in a basket under other clothes. "Can't have Stan find them and start asking questions," she thought. As Jen fell asleep, she kept wondering what was wrong with her. The next day went by fast as they explored their new neighborhood, and before they knew it, the entire day had slipped away. Towards the end of the evening, Stan went to bed with a migraine, leaving Jen all to herself. After changing into yoga pants, she sat down to watch a game show on TV when someone knocked at the door. The noise startled her. As she got up, she glanced at the phone to see what time it was. Who would be coming by after 8, she thought as she walked over to the door and looked at the peephole. "Wonder what Camilla wants," she thought as she opened the door. "Hello, Camilla," Jen said. "Sorry to bother you, but I must run to the store, and Donald is not feeling well. I don't want to leave him alone, so I wondered if you or your husband would mind coming over and sitting with him. I should be about 1/2 hour. Stan is in bed already, but I guess I can come over and stay with him for a little while," Jen said, reaching down for her shoes. "Are you sure you don't mind? I know we just met yesterday, but you seem like such a nice person." "I don't mind," Jen told her. "I wonder if I should leave Stan a note." Jen thought but dismissed it. "He won't get up, and I will only be gone a little while." Decision made, she locked the door behind her and followed Camilla to her apartment. "Donald is lying in his room down the hall and shouldn't be back up tonight. Anything I need to know if he does?" Jen asked. "Just tell him I will be back in a few minutes. If he won't return to bed, just have him sit on the couch and watch cartoons until I return. Thanks so much for doing this, Jen. I really appreciate it," Camilla said as she walked out and locked the door behind her. Jen looked around the apartment, noticing that while it was immaculate, most of the furniture was older. "I wonder how rough it's been taking care of Donald all by herself," Jen thought as she sat on the couch and turned on the TV. Flipping through the channels, she found the game show she had been watching. About halfway through the next show, Jen heard a noise down the apartment hallway coming from Donald's room. She stood up and started walking towards the noise when Donald came into view. Jen couldn't help but notice his muscles as he left, wiping his eyes. "Where is Mom?" he asked as he finally noticed Jen was standing by the couch. "She had to run out to the store to get something, Donald, and asked me to watch you while she is out," Jen told him, smiling and trying to set his mind at ease. "Mommy," Donald cried out, looking frantically for her as he went from room to room looking for her. "Donald, she will be back in a few minutes. Why don't you come here, and we will watch cartoons until she returns?" Jen's tone and the promise of cartoons seemed to win him over, so he stopped searching for Camilla and walked over to the couch with a big smile. Jen could help smiling at him as he sat down on the couch, waiting for her to find something for him to watch. Jen flipped through the channels until she found cartoons. "Oh, I love this one," Donald exclaimed, throwing his leg on the couch and turning some before leaning back. "Can you move over, sweetie, so that I can sit down too?" Jen asked him, trying to move his leg enough to allow her to sit. "Sit here," Donald told her, absently patting the couch before him. With Donald glued to the TV and not seeing a way to get him to let her sit next to him, Jen decided to sit on the floor. She could lean back and get comfortable with her back against the couch. Jen sat there watching the cartoon with Donald when she felt him run his hands over her hair. "You have pretty hair," Donald told her as he stroked her head. Jen glanced up at him, ready to ask him to stop, but she noticed he wasn't even looking at her. His entire attention was focused on the TV in front of them. "Thanks, Donald," she told him, returning to the TV. They sat like this for a few more minutes before she felt him shift on the couch again. "Do you like me?" Donald asked shyly. "Of course, Donald, I like." Jen trailed off, noticing for the first time that he was pleasuring himself against her hair instead of her hands. Jen started getting up when Donald grabbed her hair and pulled her face into his crouch. Using her hair as a means of controlling her face, he made her pleasure himself. It took a few strokes of her face before Jen found her voice. "Let me go," Jen said before Donald repeated what he had done. "That feels good," Donald told her, shifting his hands to grasp her head. He started to work harder, and Jen pounded on him, trying to get him to let her go. "Oh no, that can't be happening," Jen thought. Donald pulled her head back, letting her breathe before he pushed her down sharply. Donald did this many more times. Jen closed her eyes and stopped struggling, realizing she was no match for his strength. After about 10 minutes, Donald felt his satisfaction coming. One last thrust, and he began to jerk as he held her. Jen felt herself begin to pass out as his hands released her head. She gave him a weak push. Sliding down a bit, resting her head on the couch cushion, Jen lay breathing heavily. "This guy made me do this," she thought as she got up from the floor. "Thanks, pretty lady, that felt nice," Donald told her sleepily, gazing down at her. He rubbed his eyes as he stood and stumbled back down the hall to his room. Jen just lay there for a few minutes until she stopped shaking. She used the table to leverage herself onto the couch, where she hugged herself, trying to calm down. When she felt she could stand, she went into the bathroom to fix her makeup. She could see where the tears had caused her makeup to run along with the communication marks Donald had left on her face. She saw that Camilla had makeup remover and cleaned up as best as she could. When she looked presentable, she returned to the couch and lay down. She didn't know how long she lay like that before she heard the key in the door lock announcing that Camilla had returned. "Thanks so much for watching him," Camilla said as she entered and set a few bags on the kitchen table. "I hope he wasn't any trouble for you." Jen didn't know what to do. If she told Camilla what happened, she was afraid she might get mad at her and blame her. With Donald's condition, she wasn't sure anyone would believe her. He got up for a few minutes, but went back to bed after about 10 minutes watching cartoons. Jen said, "You okay, dear? You sound like you might be coming down with something," Camilla said, approaching her. "I guess I am not feeling well," Jen stammered, backing away from Camilla and heading to the door. "You poor dear, and I had you come over here. Let me at least fix you something to drink." "It's okay. I don't want you to go into any trouble for me. I will just go back home and go to bed. I'm sure I will feel better tomorrow," Jen said, opening the door. "It will be no trouble at all. Maybe a rain check. I just want to go to bed," Jen told her from the hall. "A rain check it is, then," Camilla told her. Jen walked to her apartment and quickly went inside. She poured herself a glass of wine to help her calm down before going to the bathroom. She took off her clothes and put them in the basket. "There's no way I'm going to be happy about being forced," Jen thought as she sat down on the floor and started to cry again. She remembered how Donald just used her despite how she felt. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became, and soon she realized she was enjoying herself. Some part of her realized that she was making a lot of noise, and if she weren't careful, she would wake up Stan. "This is so wrong," Jen thought. "This is so gross," Jen thought as she found a towel to clean up the mess she had made on the floor. She put the soaked towel and the remnants of her clothes in the basket before sneaking into her room to get her night clothes. After getting dressed, she climbed into bed and fell asleep.
Subscribe to our channel so that your second C gaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.